And this is Polygon Issuance number 81 for Friday, October 30th, 2015. Jeff Wilcox here hosting the show. And for those that are thinking this is the winter preview show, this is not the winter preview show. That will be later tonight for those that are watching this live. That would be Polygon Issuance 82. This show will have Patrick Marsh from the Storm Prediction Center on. And he's going to be here in a few minutes or so to discuss what he does at SPC, how he got involved in weather, and mainly on how he got to co-chair the National Weather Association annual meeting that was last week in Oklahoma City, the meeting that I went to and got a cold from. But while we do that, I'll probably discuss what's been going on in the weather until he gets here. And I'll probably do this again when I do the next show, which is only going to be, as I tape this, in about 80 minutes. But there's been a lot of flooding going on in Texas again. Austin, I saw Austin got 14 inches of rain. They seemingly got about that much last weekend, which affected the Formula One race down there. Several tornadoes are going on as well. There's been a few reports of tornadoes. The radar at the Weather Service in Brownsville got hit by lightning and was knocked out. So some fairly active weather going on down there. It's expected to move off to the north and east. We're expecting rain here in Iowa, where I'm at, later tonight. Not 14 inches of rain, and I would say that, probably about a quarter to a half an inch maybe. But other than that, not a whole heck of a lot going on. We had Patricia that made landfall in Mexico as a Category 5 last week, and it went up into Mexico, and it caused a lot of the flooding in Texas last week. And now we have flooding again this week. So Texas had been slowly heading back into drought. Well, they're not going into drought now. So there's that there, and a lot of places in the south were heading into drought, and they've had a lot of rain. So that drought fear is being alleviated a bit. Unfortunately, not in the west, and California's still not getting the rain they desperately need out there and whatnot. So we'll probably not discuss that with Patrick and whatnot, but there's a lot of interesting things about Patrick. So I'll probably just go through what he is at the Storm Prediction Center. He's part of the Techniques Development. He's the Techniques Development Meteorologist for the Science Support Branch of the Storm Prediction Center. That's what he is. That's his title. So we'll talk about, and I'm reading his bio, so I'll go through the bio with him when he gets here and whatnot, and where he sees himself, which he also discusses in his bio, and about how he got to co-chair the meeting, the National Weather Association annual meeting that was in Oklahoma City last week, which he co-chaired with John Ferree. And so we'll probably be doing that. So while we wait, because it could be a couple more minutes before he gets in here, and hopefully we're not going to have issues with audio or whatnot with him, because he's going to be actually doing this driving. So we've had several of those shows before where we've had guests driving while they are on our show, because we're all about that, evidently. But speaking about the stuff later tonight and next Friday, we'll be doing our winter previews on the next show, which is later tonight for those watching this on live. And we're going to be doing another one next week as well. So there's those shows where we're going to preview the winter due to El Nino taking place. So winter will be different, although anybody can say, well, it's going to be cold and there could be snow, at least here. Whether or not we get as much snow as we should get on average, whether the temperatures will be warmer or colder. I mean, it's similar to like a hurricane. Let's say like the '92 hurricane season. It only took one storm, Andrew, to make it a horrible season, even though there was only, I think, 7 named storms that year. In this case, you could say, where they're talking about the northern part of the country will be warmer than average, it only takes one big cold snap where temperatures drop below 0 to make it a season that people will remember, mainly for the cold weather for maybe about 4 or 5 days. Especially if it ends up doing a lot of damage, like breaking water lines and whatnot. Excuse me. So that will be discussed on our winter previews on shows 82 and 83. Other than that, I don't have anything else as we wait for Patrick to get here. And so we'll wait a little bit for him. Let me make sure I'm not getting anything coming, because they're talking a lot on about the fairly bad flooding taking place in Texas right now, and quite a bit of heavy rain is going to move into the south as well. In fact, I'm seeing a tweet now where they're estimating that at least a foot of rain fell in a line from the northern suburbs of San Antonio, maybe even north of that, northeastward to Austin, and then east of that. That would be around, let's say, New Braunfels is in that area. In that general area, really got dumped on. So, and then other places around there got a heck of a lot less rain, especially far west of San Antonio, like toward Del Rio, Eagle Pass, got a whole lot less rain than places north of San Antonio to Austin did. So I don't know what it is about that area they're just getting dumped on, but that seems to be where they've been getting doused with rain today and got doused with rain last weekend as well. And let's see what else I see. Still talking about the tornado watch that's actually in effect right now, north and west of Houston as well. There's been a couple of tornadoes there, a couple of warnings as well. Other than that, nothing much going on with the weather at this point. Of course, I'm, quote, stalling right now, unquote. But I will mention this because it probably would need to be mentioned that this is the weekend where we have to turn clocks back. It's daylight saving time ends on Sunday morning. This is you gain an hour of sleep, so clocks go back an hour. So you need to do that on Saturday night if you're watching this either tonight or on Saturday, the 31st, or Halloween. So a good idea would be if you're going to go out for Halloween, come back and move your clocks back an hour. So that's what we have for that. And I'm now moving stuff around. But we'll talk about the stuff when Patrick gets here and whatnot. And then we'll end this show and then start the next one right after it. So hopefully my voice is going to last through these, because this is going to be a fairly long duration night for me. So, but I can handle it. So, but I will say this, because I've noticed this on several of the models, at least, that it's going to get warmer as we move into November, which will be nice because I'm tired of turning my heat on. So temperatures in the 60s here in Iowa in November would be fairly nice. our average temperatures now are in the 50s, so for highs, and lows are in the 30s. So that'll be good. We had a few infamous snow flurries and snow squalls on Wednesday night during the Iowa high school football playoffs, which was interesting. I did not hear of any accumulations. I don't think there were any, because the ground was just warm enough that the snow likely melted on contact. It may have stuck to a few like cold surfaces like vehicles, but not a lot to get all excited about. It was nice to see. Although for the people that are thinking, oh no, winter's coming, it's only late October and we still have November, December, January, February, and even March before we finally go back to nice warm weather again. Outside of these warm spells that we can still get this time of the year, but warm spells now mean 60s, not the 80s we had a few weeks ago, or the 80-some degree temperatures that I experienced while I was down in Oklahoma City last week at the Weather Association meeting. So, whoa. So let's see. This is what I get for stalling. But anyway, so we'll keep waiting. Never hurts to wait for something. So dee 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 dee. But for and I might as well say this too, for anybody that wants to go back to, the shows that I did while I was at the Weather Association annual meeting, including the 2 shows I did when I came back because of internet connections and not being able to do shows, especially when I had to do Wednesdays, recap the Friday after I'd returned because the Wednesday evening session occurred. And then the full recap that I did on Sunday, which was the 25th, which I also did at home. You can go back and look at those. Those would be shows, 76 through 80. 76 was Sunday, the recap Sunday. 77 was Monday. 78 was Tuesday. 79 was Wednesday. And 80 was the full recap of the annual meeting. 76 and 77 were audio onlys. 78 through 80s were on Google Hangouts. And 78 I actually did with a nice backdrop of the skyline of Oklahoma City, although I was actually looking toward the state capitol building. So 78 was the only hangout I actually did while I was in Oklahoma City, because I was surprised to note that I could actually do hangouts in a hotel room. So let me, whoa, don't do that. great. Now this thing's won't work right. Won't work right. There it goes. So we continue to wait. Still talking about the weather. At this point, because the longer we have to wait, we'll probably be kind of squishing this in between the next polygon, which will be right after this one. So, however, we're still waiting at this point. But this should be a good show when Patrick gets here. We're probably going to have to rush through things. So, let's make sure I'm not going to lose stuff while I'm doing all this clicking around. So we'll keep waiting. Gotta love waiting. But the winter previews, like I mentioned, will be interesting later tonight, next Friday. So hopefully those will be good shows that everybody will enjoy. And then, of course, the following Friday after that, and I have my calendar up, and unfortunately it says October still because it's still October. That would be November 13th is when Brian Busby from KMBC in Kansas City will be on a show, a person I've tried to get on for a long time. Then after that, we'll have to see what we can come up with after that as I continue to try to email people to see it, or message people in some cases to see if they would want to be on said program or not. Okay. We are so going to try and get him on because he is ready. So I'm going to try and add him via that. Okay, let's see if this works. We'll see if he gets on now. Because we've been doing this, gosh, and he has arrived, everybody. Now, whether or not his audio works is another story.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Then my audio is working.
And you sound like you're in a library.
I am actually in SPC on my way out the door.
He's in the National Weather Center right now, going out into the parking lot.
So if you hear rustling, that's what it is. It's been a busy day, and I'm trying to pack up my stuff for the last little bit. Where they're actually doing painting and carpeting at the Storm Prediction Center on next week, and so we have to get everything packed up and moved out, and so that's what I've been trying to get ready for.
Oh, so he just gave us breaking news. The Storm Prediction Center is getting carpeting and painting.
Yeah.
Luckily they weren't doing that today with all the bad weather in Texas.
That is good for us. The good news is the operations area was actually repainted and carpeted a couple of weeks ago, back in during one of the quiet stretches. So next week, even with all the painting and everything, it should not affect operations.
Yeah, that would be a good thing, especially when it could be a fairly active southern stream with El Nino this year.
Correct. It could be interesting. I know the global numerical weather prediction models are showing at least the possibility of a big southern stream trough coming out late next week. So who knows? Maybe there'll be severe weather. Maybe there won't. It's too early to tell. But if nothing else, it'll at least probably rain again in the south.
Or in hindsight, it seems like Texas is always getting it because they had flooding rain last weekend, and now they're getting it again on Friday today. I don't know what they did wrong, because it seems like that area between Austin and San Antonio, because I mentioned this when I was stalling, that they'd gotten upwards of at least a foot of rain in a swath from north of San Antonio to Austin. And it's roughly about the same area that got it last weekend.
Yeah, the Austin-San Antonio corridor is actually, San Antonio in particularly is one of the big flash flood areas for the country. That area does not drain very well, and so the San Antonio area is known for some pretty big flooding events.
Yeah, where even when it's not even dumping that as much rain as it did, the 8, 9, 10, 12, 14 inches like they got today. I know Austin had that, and I think I was at the airport But that's enough of that, because now I think you're in your vehicle.
No, I'm still walking outside. It's so if you hear any noise, it's a little bit windy with the rain right now as well. So
it's raining in Norman right now.
Yes, it is. So I'm walking with an umbrella and an armful of stuff, and almost to my car, and then I'll be inside the car, and I don't have to deal with the rain falling on me.
So this is what we get. We have Patrick getting himself cold at the weather system from the cold front. So while you're doing that, we're going to try to get you in your car so you're not trying to talk while it's raining. So anyway, I'm looking at your bio. Well, I'm actually not. Now I'm going to be looking at your bio. And we'll go through this really quickly because we always ask our guests, be it TV or even university people, we've always asked this when we've had people on, that that you got interested in weather. And it said it was when you were in Georgia as a child.
Yes.
And watching thunderstorms. Was thunderstorms always your interest at the time from that age?
I believe so. I mean, I do remember winter weather and snow, but we didn't get a lot of that in Georgia. So, I mean, I was interested in it when it happened, but I'd say thunderstorms have probably been the primary.
Now, you did talk about, excuse me, the tornado that was in Fort Smith, Arkansas in '96.
Yes.
If I remember, and you may correct me if I'm wrong, that was one I think that the tornado came through, and the radar coverage in Fort Smith at the time was not the best. And I think that was the one that got a radar put in at Fort Smith, if I'm correct.
Correct. That is the tornado that ultimately prompted the radar going in. It's actually a rather interesting story how all that went down. I'm actually sitting here and looking for stuff. The tornado hit late at night, and there was some potential issues with the warning, in that the warning, if you ask the Fort Smith office, or not the Fort Smith office, the Fort Smith Sheriff's Department and whatnot, they say they never got the warning. The Weather Service timestamp says the warning went out at a certain time. And so the sirens in Fort Smith never sounded as the tornado came through. And by the time Fort Smith realized there was a tornado, the tornado had already knocked out power to where you would need power in order to sound the sirens.
Yeah.
The meteorological issue with that is the storm. This was during a severe weather day. There were tornado watches up most of the day for most of Oklahoma. I have some friends now that were actually out chasing the storms that day. In fact, the storm that produced the tornado that went into Fort Smith, I have friends that I hang out with and interact with regularly, chased that storm earlier in the day.
Yeah.
But as the storm progressed east and it went into the night, the radar signature still suggested the possibility of a tornado, a strong mesocyclone, but there were no reports of tornado. And as the storm, so the Weather Service was still warning tornado warning until it got very close to the Fort Smith, the Arkansas-Oklahoma border, and the Weather Service decided to go with a severe thunderstorm warning as it entered into Fort Smith because the mesocyclone appeared to have been weakening. There had been no reports of a tornado for quite some time, and so they thought the tornado threat had diminished a little bit. I mean, it was non-zero, but it was low enough that it didn't necessarily warrant a tornado warning. And so they went severe thunderstorm, and then the very next radar scan, the mesocyclone strengthened again. And so they issued the tornado warning at that point. Now, part of the reason why it looked like the mesocyclone was weakening was the closest radar to Fort Smith was in Tulsa, and so that was a long distance. And southeast Oklahoma had a radar hole, and so they decided to put, after congressional hearings and things like that, the resolution was to put a new radar in southeast Oklahoma. The residents of Fort Smith balked. The congressional delegation got on board, and so ultimately they decided not to put the radar in southeast Oklahoma. They put it in Fort Smith proper. So that's how Fort Smith got the radar, and it actually still results in a significant radar hole in southeast Oklahoma, although not as bad as it was.
Yeah.
And if you think about the cone of silence of a radar, it actually means parts of Fort Smith do not get radar coverage, or adequate radar coverage, because they're so close to the radar.
And the beam is too low, because typically, even when you get a storm that's close, even with the old radars, the 74s, where the cone of silence was a little larger, you can't see anything in that area, or even within maybe 10 miles of even the cone of silence in some cases back then.
Yeah. So, so that is the tornado that got Fort Smith the radar. I remember all of that very well. I remember going to the town hall meetings that they had regarding it. It was an interesting experience.
And you were a teenager at the time, right?
That is correct. I was in 7th grade when the tornado hit.
Yeah, and that makes me feel bad for the fact that now I just found out that Patrick Marsh is younger than me.
Sorry.
It's only for the fact because this was 96, April 21st, 1996. That was my freshman year in high school up in Iowa.
Oh, I'm 2 grades behind you.
Yeah, so just think, everybody, calculus killed me, and I would be possibly where Patrick is today if it wasn't for calculus. So, but I digress because I've mentioned that on several shows before about my calculus. Anyway, so that was the event that really got you more toward tornadoes or severe thunderstorms, just not thunderstorms in general.
That was my first experience with severe thunderstorms affecting people close to me, because I actually had a friend who lost a nephew. I think it was a nephew. It could have been a niece.
It was a cousin. That's what it says on here.
Basically, one of the, and that really or had any relation to a victim of,
you know. So then that you ended up going to the University of Arkansas and then went to Oklahoma to get your meteorology degree. So describe how that happened, more or less going to Arkansas to get pretty much your math and physics out of the way.
As mine is coming out of high school, I Arkansas. I was not offered any scholarships to the University of Oklahoma, and being out of state, my tuition at Oklahoma would have been a whole lot higher than it was at Arkansas. So I went to the University of Arkansas, studied mathematics and physics, got my degrees, and then decided to go on and pursue the meteorology in graduate school. And fortunately, I was accepted to the University of Oklahoma.
So then when you were at Oklahoma, and technically you're still in the same building as the meteorology department is now at the Weather Center.
Yes.
So how was it like at OU as a graduate student? We'll just say that for the fact because that's what you did.
Yeah.
Back then, because this is after the 99 event, well after 99, and even after the more 03 event. So everybody is wanting to do meteorology because there's all these storm chasers, or they talk about that type of stuff. Twister had been out for more than 10 years. So there's all these people just jamming into these meteorology departments. So how was it like at OU being a graduate student then, several years after the big explosion of meteorology majors?
I really don't know how to compare it because I wasn't at OU prior, so I don't know what things were like before the movie. And graduate school is a little bit different than undergraduate in that, at least at OU, they only take enough students if they can pay your tuition. So essentially, they are going to hire you as a research assistant.
Yeah.
And so in that regards, there's a finite number of slots every year. So they may have been getting more applicants, but the same number of people were coming in for graduate school. Now, for undergraduate, it was incredible because I mean, I'm coming from the University of Arkansas, where my initial major was physics. I picked up the math major my junior year, and my physics class was, or not my physics class, but my colleagues in the physics majors my year, there was 20 of us, if that. And you go to OU and they have like 130 freshman meteorology majors. There's 400 meteorology majors, undergraduates in the department. And I mean, that to me was incredible because I'm coming from where the sum total of physics majors was 50, 60, if that, at the University of Arkansas. So to having a whole lot more people was certainly shocking to me. And I will say this, contrary to the rumors that go around, when the freshmen took their first meteorology class, it's called Intro to Meteorology.
No.
The professor did not start the class by saying, look to the person on your left, look to the person on your right. Only one of you will make it. They never actually said that, but every year students would swear, oh yeah, that always happened. It did. That's just one of those rumors that grew legs.
And I think that it's not just at OU. I think it was at a lot of meteorology schools, especially big ones, because I went to Iowa State, and which is a fairly good sized meteorology school, not OU standard or even maybe Florida State where it's big and tropical. But there's always been that I've always had heard, not the rumor of that the professors say that, but that it's very hard to get through mainly because of the math. In my case, that's what ended up killing me was the calculus. But
meteorology is, a lot of people do not realize that meteorology sits at the intersection of applied mathematics and applied physics. And so unless you have a good understanding of both, it's really, really, really hard to get through a meteorology program. In a lot of ways, when I started graduate school, it was easier for me than a lot of meteorology majors who went on to graduate school, because my undergraduate degree was in mathematics and physics. So I had the advanced mathematics and I had the advanced physics beyond what was required for a meteorology degree. I had to actually then, my first year of graduate school, I took a senior level meteorology class because I had to go back and learn a lot of the meteorology theory and meteorology terminology. So, in some ways, I was more prepared for the mathematics and physics of graduate school. Did I lose you?
Yeah, you were going in and out, but I could understand most of it. That it's Oklahoma internet or Wi-Fi or LTE or whatever. So
yeah, I was gonna say I looked down at my phone and I'm on 4G, not LTE, which is not normal.
Yeah, it's Oklahoma. It's rain. We'll blame the weather.
That's very true.
So because that's interesting, because if I look back at when I went to school, because at Iowa State, it was almost, and it may not be the case now, because I think they did change things a lot since I left. Because I had Dr. Gallus on from Iowa State on a show last summer. But what it was at Iowa State was taking a meteorology degree, you were 2 or 3 credits away from a math major, more or less.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, if I had known that, I would have probably taken something else to maybe take a meteorology minor and major in something connected to meteorology today, which unfortunately at that time didn't exist or was very spotty at best, or wasn't even a major at the time.
Yeah.
So things are a lot different. There's more avenues now than there used to be back when I was even in college in 99, when I started in the fall of 99, or even before that. So
yeah, no, same for me. That's why I picked up a math major, is because I was a couple courses away from a math major from the physics program. And then, to be perfectly honest with you, if I were to go back to school today, if I knowing what I know now about what I do and the field, the meteorology field and the evolution, if I were going into school right now, I would say I would do undergraduate in math and physics or computer science.
yeah.
I would then do a master's in meteorology, but I would do a PhD in statistics.
Yeah, and the weird thing is with me, statistics I love. Physics I can understand. even though I didn't get a degree, I can look at a lot of meteorological mumbo jumbo and I can understand it. It's just it's not the physics. The calculus is what is kind of like, that's the part where I don't understand to a certain extent. And I have calculus books. I kept my calculus book from Iowa State. I paid for it. I have student loans. I own this book. I'm keeping it. This is why I'm not where you are right now, because of this calculus book. I don't have my camera on, but I'm pointing at it. So, but nevertheless, we'll continue because we're going to try to move along since
Okay.
and whatnot. Otherwise, we'll be talking about just how we got degrees and how I didn't get a degree for the next 20 minutes. So you were involved with Vortex 2, which is the second big incarnation of the Vortex project.
Yes.
So how did you end up supposedly saying you were going to be leading weather briefings and then ended up taking over the operations? And I'm trying to see how this is written, because I'm not going to blame everybody. But so how did you end up going from where you thought you were going to be to where you ended up being on that project?
Well, it's one of those. I was always asked to be a part of Vortex 2 Operations Center because I like the forecasting, I like the doing the weather briefings, and I liked a lot of that aspect of it. And so I agreed to do that. And so I was always going to be in Norman at the home base, relaying information to the field. Well, basically, it came down to after the first day or two, the internet connection in the field was so poor they could not they could not visually see our weather briefing. And so as a result, they started doing their own. So I never ended up doing the formal weather briefings repeatedly. What I did do was I did continue to run the operations center, which meant during the late morning through evening hours, I had people. We were monitoring the radars. I had written some software that allowed us to display all of the Vortex 2 positions on the Gibson Ridge radar software, and so we were able to keep up in real time where all the pieces of the Vortex Armada were located. And so we were relaying information, and we were the safety net. Because out in the field, they would lose data from time to time. They wouldn't be able to keep up with the latest radar. They might not be able to download the radar data because it was such a big file. And so if we noticed that they were getting in a position where they were getting too close to a tornado, or a tornado was developing over the top of them, or one of the radar trucks was about to drive into a hail core, we would relay that information to them and be like, hey, you guys need to make alternate plans here. Here's an escape route that you need to take. And so that's what I ended up doing for Vortex 2.
Now, with regards to the new Vortex project, the one that's going to be over the Southeast, are you planning on getting involved with that in any way?
If I was and my bosses allowed me to, I definitely would. However, being that center and we're already down a couple people due to injury and vacancies, I certainly will not be allowed the time to do something like that.
Yeah, we need more people.
Yes.
I think that's where, because a lot of people have said that the Southeast, where there's been all these outbreaks, and it seems like the plains have had, except for a couple of events, especially 2011, it just seemed like 2011 everybody got an event. But it just seems like more and more the Southeast is getting more of these events, and the plains seem to be getting less or not as frequent. So I'm at least somewhat happy that they're at least doing something in the Southeast to see what the difference is between Oklahoma and, say, like Alabama, because there are differences. And I'm at least happy they're finally looking into this. So, because that would be interesting for you since you grew up in Georgia. So I'm sure it's near and dear to your heart, being from Georgia to begin with, that something's going to be done there.
Yeah, it'll be certainly interesting. I look forward to hearing what they find.
Now, when you talk about, now I'm going to see, you talked about your memorable moments, and you talked about all these tornado events, the May 10th, 2010, all the three events that occurred in 2011, which is the April 27th event, which I've had several guests on from that, May 22nd, which I believe was Piedmont.
May 22nd,
Or
2011 was
May
Joplin.
22nd was Joplin. May 24th was Piedmont.
Right.
Okay. I confused them because I the minute I said it, I was like, no. Because I remember, yeah, I remember May 24th, during the event, I remember because I watched some clips from that where they mentioned Joplin in Oklahoma City. They mentioned it because Joplin had just occurred, and people were still weary of that on May 24th, and that's when the EF5 at Piedmont hit. So all of those events, the one in 2010 and then these three in 2011, why were they so memorable for you in your career?
May 10th, 2010 was memorable because that was during Vortex, and a couple things happened. One, the storm developed right over the top of the National Weather Center, and I was standing on the back lawn, and the tornado develops 100, 200 yards south of me. So I was nearly hit by that one. Then I went back inside to coordinate with the Vortex crew because that tornado raced toward my house. And so it was one of those, I'm working, can't go home. I don't need to go home to. And then it's one of those, I had friends in the Vortex Armada that I had to relay a message to that said, you need to get out of your area right now. 5 minutes. So that one stands out. April 27th, 2011 stands out because I remember watching the tornadoes in SPC operations area on the internet, just sitting there going, oh my gosh. May 24th, 2011, again, more tornadoes nearly hit the Storm Prediction Center. In fact, one of the southernmost storm of the big tornadoes that day lifted, or it dissipated about 3 to 4 miles southwest of the weather center. And if it had not dissipated and it hit the building, that would have been bad. In fact, after it dissipated, debris was falling on the National Weather Center. Things like baseball cards and insulation. And so that was a very surreal moment.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's why some of those really stand out. Same with May 19th and May 20th, 2013. There's the Shawnee tornado. The wall cloud passed right over the weather center before it produced the tornado. And on that tornado, I was moving that the following weekend, and that tornado nearly hit the house that I lived in and the house I was moving to. So I could have very easily lost 2 houses on that day. May 20th, obviously that's more, and that was a big deal.
Yeah.
Watching that. Yeah, it's very surreal, and in a lot of ways, and I say this, and I don't say this lightly, but working at the Storm Prediction Center, and when you issue a high risk, especially a high risk for tornadoes, when you come into work that day, there's this sense of, I don't even know how to describe it, because you know that there is a good chance that people are going to die today.
Yeah.
And it's this feeling of helplessness. It's one of those, you've done everything you can. We're doing our best to make sure that the forecasts are out there. But tornadoes are so unpredictable, they're so violent, they're so localized that it is almost impossible to guarantee 0 fatalities. And so knowing that there's a good chance that people are going to die that day is really sobering, excuse me.
Yeah. And the thing is with the storms up here in Iowa, a lot of the tornadoes we've had the last few years have been on squall lines, and they're rain wrapped, which is very somewhat atypical. But you don't know what the tornadoes are going to look like, because I mean, not every tornado is the same. You're not going to get for example, like a little hopscotch tornado, like the Shawnee tornado started as when it went over Lake Thunderbird and went to the east and then became a wedge tornado, compared to, say, the Moore tornado, which started out fairly small, and then 2 minutes later, it's a wedge tornado, or El Reno, which started about a week and a half later, which started small and became a humongous tornado with little satellite vortices around it. I mean, and tornadoes are, you just don't know. You can have high risks and have 80 or 90 tornadoes, but they're all like zeros, ones, twos, or you could have like 30 and 5 of them are threes, fours, or fives.
Yeah, I mean, a good example of that is the tornado season of 2013. Everybody remembers it as, or I shouldn't say everyone, a lot of people remember it as a really bad tornado year.
Yeah.
In terms of, there were a lot of really bad tornadoes. But in reality, there really wasn't.
Yeah.
There were two. There's the November outbreak, but other than that, there wasn't that many outbreaks. People think of May as a big tornado year, but on May 19th, there are only 2 really strong tornadoes that day.
Shawnee and Kearney.
Right. May 20th, there's 1.
Yeah, more.
May 31st, there's 1.
Yeah, El Reno. And
there
were smaller ones. There was a few smaller ones. I think Moore got hit again that same day by an EF1.
Right. And then, I mean, there's the Bennington, Kansas tornado. But see, May 13 was known for a lot of days in which there was 1 spectacular tornado.
Yeah. And then the rest of the time was boring.
A bunch of outbreaks.
Yeah. And
right. Whereas 2011, we had.
Yeah, go on.
No, I was going to say in 2011 we had April 14th, 15th, and 16th, which were 3 days, 3 tornado outbreaks. Oklahoma, a high risk 16th. Then we had April 26th and April 27th, in which we had high risks, I think, for all 3 days, not all the 26th and 27th.
Yeah.
I mean, 2011 was the year of the outbreaks. 2013 was the 1 spectacular tornado per day.
And the thing is, SPC doesn't know if it's going to be a 1 big tornado or 100 tornadoes when you issue high risks or moderates or enhanced or whatnot.
We certainly hope that the bigger the risk, the more widespread the tornadoes are, because that's what we're supposed to do. But unfortunately, that's why you sometimes have busts.
It leads.
The environment is certainly favorable, but
yeah,
and we're thankful for that.
Yeah, to have a day when nothing happens, you're probably like at least thankful. But then you have to go back and look as to why it didn't do what you thought it was going to do.
Correct.
Because there's been a lot of cases that
we're always.
So now we've just done all that because I noticed there was, because for example, when this year, how many tornadoes does anybody remember? Now, for you being in Oklahoma, Bridge Creek this year was the big event day. Outside of that, Fairdale, Illinois was the big tornado of the year, but it's almost like another case of 1 big spectacular tornado and just a few others. And then Bridge Creek, 1 big tornado that was rain wrapped, and then a couple smaller ones, and that was it. Outside of that,
March 25th had a couple. There was the Sand Springs tornado in Tulsa. Yeah. There was the F3 or EF3, excuse me, in South Oklahoma City, and then there's the
the other Moore tornado that was shown live on several of the TV stations.
Yeah, the infamous tornado that came from a outflow boundary almost. They discussed that at NWA.
Yeah.
I watched that, and that was so interesting. Although I was not watching them live, I was actually watching Tulsa television live on the internet stream, and they happened to just show the Moore tornado going through on Tulsa television because it was interesting.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Oh no, it's hitting Moore again."
Yep.
Yep, that town. And I drove through there, and when I was driving through Moore, and I was like, "Okay, this is the tornado. This is this path. This is this path." Because the Interstate 35, it's like, well, this tornado hit here. This tornado hit here. It's almost like you can just rack off 99, 03, 2011, the El Reno day where it was a little tiny tornado, and then this year. And then the 2013 tornado. There's too many tornado tracks in just Moore alone that you can track through and whatnot. And it's surprising because, and people mentioned this at NWA, that there were, and I think you might have even mentioned, or somebody else did, about being in Moore, and there's still damage there. I don't remember from which tornado because there's been so many of them, but I think it's from,
Damon Lane mentioned.
Yes, Damon mentioned it. Yeah, I was thinking somebody mentioned it. And we drove, Henry and I, Henry is typically my co-host.
Yeah.
He was with me.
Damon mentioned it.
Yeah, and I had to see for myself because we drove down to Moore. We drove to Plaza Towers and that area around there, and you can easily see where the tornado was because there's no trees or very few. And they're still building houses there, especially around Plaza Towers. They're still building new housing. And it's kind of surreal. And then it made it more surreal when I was driving back home because we drove down and drove back. Last Thursday night when we were driving back from NWA, our hotel room was in Joplin. And I purposely did it in Joplin because, and this is a story, I've told this I think once or twice. My father and I were driving down to the NASCAR race in Texas in 2011. This was in April. And our overnight stop on our way down was Joplin. And we drove around Joplin on April of 2011. And then Joplin was then smashed by the EF5 about 6 weeks later. And this was my first time back since then. And I've seen Google Street View, so I know what it looked like. But seeing it and then comparing it to Moore in 2013 and where Joplin is now 4 years after the fact, you can still see the scars, and it's going to be like that for a long time.
Yeah, my dad was.
So.
My dad went up to Joplin to help with some of the debris removal, and I think.
Yeah, I mean, because I've seen wall clouds. I've seen funnel clouds. I had a rotating wall cloud go over my head once when I was chasing back when I was young and stupid back in the day. And the nearest tornado to where I live now was back in 06, and it was an EF1. And it just did a little damage. And it was like the main news story on the Weather Channel. Don't know why. There was like an EF2 further down the road. But anyway, because they had them talking and whatnot. But for people to actually witness seeing the destruction, not like the day after, because if you're not there to help the people, then you need to not be there. But to see it long after. Because I went to Birmingham in 2011 in November to see it myself, because I always want to see what tornadoes do. And I think it's almost like that's what everybody needs to see. This is what this did and whatnot. So it kind of gave me a kind of a better perspective of what tornadoes can do and what they can actually cause in terms of physical, mental, and property damage and whatnot. That's kind of so. So
I will never forget watching live the May 2013 tornado going through Moore, knowing that's like 3 miles up the road or 5 miles up the road. That I won't easily forget that.
and the sad thing about it is it's on YouTube, so you can watch it. I always watch old outbreaks. That might be geeky for me, but I always do that because I want to, especially when I've been to these places now. Because I've been back to, since I was in Oklahoma for the NWA, I've actually seen these places again. Because I've been in Oklahoma City before, driving through. But to see them, you see the event, and then you have seen the aftermath maybe a year or so or two later. It gives you perspective of what this did and whatnot. So anyway, as we're trying to move along further, you say that you want in 5 to 10 years, you still want to be at SPC. Now, whenever this was written, do you still see yourself in 5 to 10 years still there and maybe in a better position or in the same position or maybe in a totally different position?
I have no idea what the future holds. I jokingly, when I was interviewed for my position, um, I was asked the question, "Where do you see yourself in 10 years?" And I said, "Being the director of the Storm Prediction Center." Just threw that out there. It's something that I had wanted to do since I was a kid. Even, I mean, it wasn't called the Storm Prediction Center at the time.
The National Severe Storms Forecast Center.
Yes, NSFC. NSSFC. And so, I mean, that's always been a dream of mine. But as I've gotten a little bit older, it's more, I don't know what the future holds. I know that I need to be open to it. Would I like to be at the Storm Prediction Center? Yeah. Would I like to be closer to achieving that dream? Sure. But I don't know what the future actually has. So we'll see.
Would you have the capability of, let's say, going to a weather service office to be an MIC or a WCM?
Um, so the way the government works is you get grades based on your position, and so you can only apply for positions that are at your grade or below, unless you've been at your grade at least 1 year, in which case then you can apply for a position 1 grade above yours. So most MIC positions are 2 grades above mine, so I wouldn't be able to go to an MIC position, or at least most MIC positions I wouldn't be eligible for, but I could go to like a WCM or a SU position.
Yeah.
I'm certainly not opposed to that. One of my other dreams that I thought would be to go back to Tulsa, which was the forecast office that oversaw Fort Smith and one of the towns that I grew up in, and maybe be the SU there at some point. So that's a possibility. I have no idea. Who knows? Maybe I will go to the Weather Channel and be the next Greg Forbes. Who knows? I'm trying to keep an open mind.
That would be weird. I can't see Greg Forbes leaving, but he is getting up there in age, so anything's open at this point.
I think he'll do it as long as he possibly can.
So we have to talk about the NWA meeting. So how were you able to get involved with the co-chairing of the meeting? I assume it's only because it was in Oklahoma City, but how did you get involved with it? And now he's disappeared. He has disappeared, everybody. He may have arrived. I can hear him, maybe. Okay, now I can hear you.
Hello?
Okay, now go on, because now I think it came back.
All right. That was odd because I could hear you just fine. I've been trying to get involved for years. I met the executive director at some NWA functions, and I told her that I wanted to get involved. And so the publications committee asked me to get involved, so I was on the publication committee. And since I'm active in the Norman community, they were looking for someone from the Norman weather community to sort of work on the NWA annual meeting. And I guess I was foolish enough to say yes. And so that's.
So then, if you were to grade how the meeting went, what grade would you give it?
Oh, I'm very biased. I would. To me, it's the greatest conference in the history of conferences, just because I had a big role in it.
Except for the temperature problem.
Correct. I had no control whatsoever over the temperature. That was handled by the Cox Convention Center.
Could it have been related to the fact that they had some ice thing? I think it was Sunday night in the convention center's arena.
I don't think so, because I think that's normal. I just think that because of the cooler weather outside and the event, that when the air handlers were on, it was just cold, and as soon as you turned the air handlers off, it got stuffy.
Yeah.
So they just had it going nonstop. I know Thursday afternoon it got kind of warm actually, because they did turn the air handler off, and that was because they had some sort of cattle auction going on in another part of the building, and if they had turned the air handlers on, it would have started to smell of cattle, and so they turned it off.
Oh, good night. And I was not there for Thursday afternoon, especially that was the afternoon when it started thundering and lightning. And everybody at a weather conference, of course, when it starts doing something, they're not paying attention to the conference. They're paying attention to what's going on outside. So outside the cold weather and feeling like I needed to get a sweater, it was a pretty good conference. I mean, it was my first, and I know you said it was your second. So everybody talked about the evening session, Wednesday evening, which was the first time they'd ever done that. And I would actually say that was probably thumbs up for that. Because
I'm glad that you enjoyed it.
Co-chaired that session.
Yeah, that was my little twist on the conference.
Do you think that they're going to keep doing that when they go to Norfolk next year?
I will suggest it to them. I think that enough people enjoyed it that they might do another evening session. It may not be on Wednesday evening. It may be a different evening. But I would think that they would do it again.
Yeah, because I went to half the session on Wednesday night, especially when everybody was deciding to do drinks and whatnot, because that was kind of a little bit funny. It was almost like the NWA drinking game.
Yeah, that was an interesting twist.
So when we look back, okay, when you look back at everything, I don't want to end up asking what you thought the best session was or what the best talk was. What was your most memorable moment from this year's meeting then?
It was on the evening session, the Wednesday evening session, and it was the talk by Ashton Parafit on the world record.
And your internet's dying, but I'm looking it up. Oh, the 100 inches of snow.
One of the yes.
Okay.
Talking about he was talking about getting up at 3 a.m. and calling the Italian consulate, trying to get information. Just hearing how much he'd worked on that project and how much of his heart and soul he put into it. I just thought it was awesome.
So, yeah, I was not in the room at that time because I had left at the time, but I heard a lot of good things about that from Twitter and whatnot. Because Twitter was always going nuts about everything that was going on. Lots of live tweeting and the like. So overall, it was a great meeting. I assume it's going to be, since NWA is based there, it's probably going to be back in Oklahoma City in 4 or 5 years. I would take an assumption. I could ask if you know, outside of next year, do you have any hints of where NWA is going to be?
I have no idea. I would say typically end up rotating every year's at 3. So 1 year it's in the east, 1 year it's in the central, 1 year it's in the west. So we just did the central. So I think next year they're going to go east to Norfolk, and then the year after, I would expect
I would say, yeah, it'll be Phoenix, Tucson, probably something like
more
that.
west. I don't know for sure.
Because I was thinking about this when I was there, and Janice was running around like crazy along with everybody else of wanting to have the NWA meeting in 2018 in Iowa, because it'd be the 10-year anniversary of the flood and the 25-year anniversary of the flood of 93, either in Iowa or in St. Louis. Because that would be interesting. You'd want to have like historical places. So, but I don't know. I don't have any control over where they put it. So, and I know you don't either.
You can certainly suggestions be known.
Yeah.
I would encourage you to do that.
So as we wrap this up, because the next show is now in about 10, 20 minutes. So how can people get a hold of you if they want to get a hold of you?
The 2 best ways to get a hold of me are, 1, via Twitter. My Twitter handle is @PMarshWX. Or send me an email. So I may not respond immediately, but I promise I eventually will. My email address is patrick.marsh@noaa.gov.
Okay, so that's how they can get a hold of you if they want to discuss anything SPC related or whatnot. And we typically do shout outs, but I think you're pretty much going to shout out anything about NWA and whatnot, because I'm going to shout out the NWA meeting that we went to. Well, you shared it. I was there. So do you know if they've put a lot of the stuff from there online yet? Because I know people asked.
I would actually be the one to do that. I have not. I may spend some time this weekend doing it. We did not record the presentations this year. We were unable to do that. So we won't have recordings online, but I hope to try to get permission to post the presentations online.
Yeah, like the posters and whatnot?
Yes.
Okay. So that is at least good, something good, so people can look at that. So thank you, Patrick, for being on at short notice. It only took a couple of days for you to be on. So, and I assume you're now at your arrival point.
I'm getting close. It's raining, so the traffic is a little bit slower.
Yeah, so that's what happens. It's not going to rain here until later tonight. So it's just raining everywhere at this point, except in California. They need the rain. They ain't getting any.
Hopefully they'll get some soon.
So thanks, Patrick, for being on. And
my pleasure.
Okay, so, and we may have you on again maybe later next year after everything comes back, because I'm not going to get into the personal issues with Patrick, but he's about to be having a little one.
A significant life change.
Yeah, he's having a little one join his family. So we congratulate him and his wife with that coming up. So you can get a hold of me. Well, I'll save that for the next show, which is going to be on in like 10 minutes. So anybody, so if anybody wants to watch the next episode, it's going to be on in like 10 minutes. And the computer just went to sleep on me. So thank you, Patrick, and thanks everybody for watching. And for those that are watching this live, the next show will be on in 10 minutes. So thank you, and have a great weekend, and stay dry.